Welcome to the Barndominium Podcast, your number one source for all things Barndominium. From designs and layouts, the Barndominium lifestyle, to the details of the build process, and everything in between. We are bringing all the Barndominium experts and professionals across the country to one place. And now your hosts, John and Jonathan.
Hey everyone, it is John and Jonathan Michaela, and we are here with you again for another fantastic episode of the Barndominium Podcast. And we're so excited today. We got so much information that we don't even know if we're going to be able to cram it all in. So we may have to do additional episodes, but we have got just a ton of great information coming today for you. And we are here with Megan Woodworth and Emily Marshall. Both of them are if you're doing any kind of searching out there at all in the Barndominium world, you are sure to stumble upon these wonderful ladies because of all the great information they're putting out there and how they're serving the Barndominium community. So Megan's doing stuff with her Barndominium tour in her community, and Emily and her husband are the Mr. and Mrs. Post Frame that you are seeing out there online. So we have celebrities with us today, you guys. So we're digging on this and we're super excited. So Megan and Emily, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Hey, so before we ever always get started, Jonathan always throws out kind of the question on the little bit of the background, and so I'm going to hand it over to him and let him kind of kick off our normal inaugural questions.
Cool. All right. So, before we dive into all the different information and everything that you are doing for the Barndominium community, what is the reason that you decided to get into like barndominiums versus going like the conventional home route when like with your own builds and just everything you guys are doing with your businesses?
I'll let Emily go first on that one.
Well, I should probably make up a more elaborate reason, but the truth of the matter is we moved to Iowa from Northern Illinois 5 years ago, and my husband grew up on a farm in Illinois. He wanted to get back out into the countryside. And so we bought an acreage and he came to me a couple months afterwards and said, hey, I want to build a barn. It's a post frame building, but I want to make it our house. And he's like, how like the old family farm had all these buildings on it. That's what I mean. And I was like, oh, okay, well, sounds good to me. He sold me on low maintenance, high efficiency. And he's like, and we can basically make it look however do whatever you want inside. Like, I'm happy to do this for you. So I said, sure, why not? I'll have a post frame home and have a stack of graph paper with tons of different variations of our home on it. Started building it. Didn't even know it was called a Barndominium really until about a year into our project. And so, that's how we got into this space, is that he started building it himself, started YouTubing it, and here we are.
Fantastic. Megan, how about you?
Well, ours is a little different. So my husband was in the Navy. We had moved all over with him. And I'm from Central Texas, where barndominiums are pretty normal. There's like 6 on my parents' 1 mile dirt road. So when we got married, I just finished nursing school. My husband was still in the Navy and was a medical provider, and he had all these hobbies. He did resto mods, he did fabrication, he fixed everything. So we knew we both needed workspace, and we thought, oh, let's build a house with a gigantic shop attached. And then we got on YouTube and found Paul and Emily. And we were avid watchers for the first couple of years when we were planning. And then we decided to take the leap. Turns out our county wasn't going to allow us to do more shop space than house. So we had to build bigger on the house side than we originally intended to. But we got our shop space. We have a red iron structure and absolutely love everything about it. We're about 5 miles off of the Atlantic in North Carolina, so very far away from Texas. They're not normal here, and it was an uphill battle getting the county to work with us while we were building this, but it was worth it. We have all the room in the world for projects now. We have a 2-story garage with 3,800 total square feet, so we're very happy.
That's fantastic. Well, and you mentioned something, and we talked about before we went live on the show that this thing is definitely going to morph because we, kind of have an idea of which way it's going to go. But I'm already thinking, you'd mentioned about your county have, creating some resistance for you. And we hear that a lot, like when we get posts on our site and, people emailing us like, hey, I'm being told by my township they won't do this. Both of you guys have now lived through it, or you live through it regularly with consulting clients. So what are some of the things you would say about like those types of roadblocks, or, we'll call them maybe speed bumps instead of roadblocks? What would you say about some of those types of challenges you get into where a municipality seems to be the stumbling point?
Well, what we found is that the stumbling blocks with your county are often the same kind of stumbling blocks with your lending. It's that maybe they don't understand what you're talking about. And so I always tell people it's really important to be educated on the type of construction that you're proposing. It's really important to understand what the foundation work, because that's a big factor. So it's going to be challenging in a lot of some areas, but you will create problems for yourself if you as an individual are not well organized and you don't know what you're talking about. So that's why we produce so much education around this, is because we are passionate about people being able to be informed and not just calling up their county and saying, I want to build a barn dough, because that's
going to go badly.
Yeah. That's going to give them some information, and it might not be anything close to what you're actually talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I second all of that.
Okay. And Megan, with you being as active as you are kind of with the community that you've built, being a connector inside of the Barndominium community, where do you direct people to go for, when they have questions like that? Do you say, hey, pick your stuff up and go down to the local township, or do you tell them to get on posts and ask questions? Like what do you, where do you give as recommendations?
So the thing that I tell people when they ask me that immediately is I have to get their baseline, because when someone comes to me and says, I'm having trouble with my county, they won't let me build a barndominium, it can be for 40 different reasons. And most of the time, the reasons are falling along the lines of, I don't have plans, I don't have an idea of how I'm going to get this done, and I don't have a contractor, but I asked my county if I could build a barndominium, and they're telling me that I'm not zoned for that, because they're thinking that it's going to be some agricultural structure, that it's going to be hideous, that it's not going to have any of the things that a home has, and they're not building on agricultural land. They're not building really out in the middle of nowhere. So they're running into, they aren't educated enough on the vocabulary, and they don't know what to tell them. They don't have details. So I always tell people to get your baseline, figure out what you want to build, because you can, unless you're in the middle of a downtown somewhere or you're in a neighborhood, you can pretty much build what you want to build as long as your plans are detailed enough to tell people what it is. You might have to conform here and there for a few things, but there shouldn't be a problem. So generally I tell people, figure out what it is that you want first, and maybe go so far as to buy plans or get stock plans somewhere and take that into your county and talk to someone and show them exactly what you want to do. The more detail, the better. And you're going to spend a lot of time, but you're not going to get it done otherwise, really, unless you just want to be frustrating yourself and other people.
And that, that actually leads again to another segue. Sorry, Jonathan, if you got things, go ahead and hop in. But like I said, my mind is going. But even before we start talking, Emily was sharing with us kind of like how they have this system of kind of almost like a 1, 2, 3 step, where if somebody called, Emily, you actually have a process set up where you could give people advice on how to get those plans put together, correct?
Yes, we call it the Barndominium Process, and it is a minimal fee to get access to a series of worksheets that talk a client through everything. They talk through, do you have land? Who's your point of contact at your county? What permits do you have to pull in order to build in general? It goes through budgeting, it goes through financing, it goes through all of the design elements that you want. And so it's a way we have some clients, like the majority of our clients, they do it and then they move right into design services with us. And then from there into like project management consulting, different things like that. But some people, they go through it and they realize that this isn't the right direction for them. They might go, oh, wow, I got the information that I needed. I saved myself a lot of heartache of trying to pursue something that wasn't going to work out for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Megan, you're laughing. What do you think? You got something that comes to mind, or?
No, I get giddy when she talks about the Barndominium process, because we've been talking since, right around Thanksgiving of 2021. We've been talking to each other a few times a week. We do podcasts together. But I think over the first year that we were talking, we were saying, these are all the DMs that we get constantly. I want to build, but I don't know where to start. I want to build. I have land, but I don't know where to go from here. And so over the last year or so, in those conversations, we've kind of talked about how awesome it would be to have a process like this. So when Paul and Emily started working on it, I was like, let me give you all the pointers on what people are asking me. Let me see your worksheets. Like, I want to help. And so now this is the resource that I get to point people to, because I get close to 100 DMs a day across platforms from people more or less along those lines.
Yeah.
Or I want to buy a barndo, but can you send me a barndo in this state? And so for me, it's like, this is something that I am so excited to see them doing. And I'm really excited that I get to point people that direction, because had we had something like that when we went to get started, building in a weird place where they're uncommon, building a structure that's really not used for anything other than warehouses here, and building during COVID, like, it would have been so awesome for someone to hand me a list and say, this is the checklist of all the things you need to know because you bought raw land and you've never owned a house before, but you want to build a custom home by yourself. Like, here you go. Like, I can't tell you how valuable that is. And 9 times out of 10, most of the people that ask me these questions about how do I get started, what do I do, I'll spend my time telling them, and then they'll go, oh, wow, that's a lot. And then they never do it. So being able to point them Emily's direction and say, she has a whole process for this. It's, $150 and it's amazing, use my code, whatever. And then they go, they do their thing, and they really determine whether or not it's something they want to take on. Which, I don't know if you've ever looked at barndominiums on Zillow, but for every 10 that you see for sale that are completed and someone's lived in, there's 1 or 2 that are half done or really, really poorly done, where you can tell they went in thinking this is what I want to do. And then halfway through, they were like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
This is not for me.
I was on, matter of fact, when I was doing a little research, on you guys, I found I was on a multiple listing type site, one of the traditional sites. And that's exactly what I found, as a barndominium. I'm like looking at it, and first they had the renderings, and I'm like, holy smokes, this thing is framed up. And then somebody stopped. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a fun one, because of course we do financing. And even from a financing standpoint, I'm like, okay, you can do that. But somebody just created a way bigger mess for themselves and for the next buyer all the way around on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So that's funny. All right. Well, Jonathan, I'm stealing the mic. Okay.
Yeah, I actually have a question. So that kind of leads into, Realtor.com is like our go-to for whenever we want to search for a house for sale. And on your website, I actually see that you have just multiple listings across the country posted on there. Do you find that there's any challenges with selling a barndominium other than being unfinished? Because one of the things that I think of on a barndominium is that they're really tailor-made into that individual. Like for me, I love hunting. I love my 4-wheelers and dirt bikes. So when I think of barndominium, I'm going to have a huge garage space with mounts and ATVs all over the place in there. Do you find that some people have a challenge selling it because of that reason, or because they are kind of tailor-made? Or
Yes. Well, they're custom homes. At the end of the day, unless you are moving to, which there's a couple in Kansas that you can look up, but they're barndominium communities. Unless you're moving into one of those, you are building a totally custom home with custom plans, custom finishes, everything. Whether it's a super baller luxury barndominium with a gorgeous home on one side, or if it's just a home, a really cozy home. They are more unique. So the good thing about barndominiums, I will say, they're harder to sell, yes, but there's a lot of people that want that. I mean, nine times out of 10, you talk to a bachelor, he'd be perfectly happy to live in, a house with a giant garage and, just an apartment with a huge garage. So there's definitely people out there. And with everyone moving to work from home in a lot of instances, I think that barndominiums are going to get easier and easier to sell. In my experience, the ones that are done very nicely on the inside, not necessarily luxury finishes, but just well done. Of course, they sell faster. They're easier to sell. They sell for a higher price than the ones that are your flipper special, essentially, that are kind of haphazardly put in, or they just didn't really design it at all. And that's the same with any home, but people are definitely shopping for barn doors for sale. I posted one this morning that's been shared over 1,000 times now. So wow. It's crazy.
You know, that makes me think too, Megan, from just the financing standpoint for our listeners, and we know they're hearing this. You made a good comment. It's just like a barn door is just like any other house, right? Like if you build something that's totally unique and it's like just one of a kind, regardless of what it is, if it's a barn door, a custom home, a dome home, a modular home, it doesn't matter. You're going to face challenges with financing. So I think it's one of the big misconceptions people have about barndominium financing that we see is that you run into that kind of stuff. Whereas if you try to stay within more of a framework, then for financing, it becomes easier too. So I thought I would just hop that in there just because I've seen that a lot recently. So matter of fact, there was even a property on your site that I was clicked on, and it's got the equestrian barns and stables and everything, and a small like little apartment. And that's going to be a challenge out there. It's certainly somebody I could see wanting. Matter of fact, I got a friend in the banking community. I would love that, but it's going to have its own set of challenges. So,
And also, I'll interject that it's in the barndominium world, DIY is very popular, and that's something that people need to really think about. Just because your county may not have regulations that prevent you from doing something, if you are going to do your own home, you need to think about that from like the resale standpoint too, that you need to make sure that you can prove that you did things properly, that nobody has to worry about it. And that's coming from somebody that we're like the OG barndo DIYers. My husband did like 90% of the construction by himself, not with a crew, but by himself on our home. So we know DIY, we are fans of DIY, but we're fans of being good at it, not just for the sake of saving money.
Let's run with that. Sorry, John, I'm going to cut you off because I got another thing. Emily brought up a great point again, because to mimic that. So on our last episode, one of our last episodes, we had a guest on here from Indiana, wonderful couple. They built a beautiful, truly luxury barndominium. And they don't, work with do-it-yourselfers. They are, start to finish turnkey. And you guys have your own step, going back to what Megan said about the Barndominium process with you, that you can actually consult do-it-yourselfers along the way. And of course, you should get paid for that, right? You've got a fee for it, and you charge them, but it's very nominal. Very nominal fee that you can consult with them on. And I'm just going to say for our listeners, let me tell you, I'm in Emily's camp. I built my own home in '96, so I was the general contractor. I swung the hammer and did stuff, right? And when we built our version of a barndominium in 2018, I'm getting older, and I'm also getting a little wiser for myself and what my body can do. And I had my builder friend. I drafted everything up. He did all the work on it. But even in our last barndominium, I said, hey, this next time around, if I'm doing stuff, I'm not touching the hammer. I don't want to be involved with that. I want it turnkey. But Emily, you guys you take the ambitious people that want to do it themselves. You help them so that they don't end up with this, boggled mess. Because I've got posts on our site that shows, hey, here's concrete that turned out hideous. Here's, roof trusses that ended up, on hangers versus, the notched out resting on beams. You guide them through, don't make these mistakes, because not only is it pragmatic, but to resale and then through the whole process, because it just compounds, right? Once you make one error, you're adding on top of the other. So did you want to talk a little bit about that service?
Oh, yes. So we have a couple of different ways that we assist people. One is through all of our thousands of hours of free content, because we've been posting about this stuff for 4.5 years on all the different social platforms. The other way is we have an exclusive Patreon membership, which Patreon is a paid service that is meant to be like a smaller community of your people that are interested in really getting to know you. So we focus on DIY building, DIY contracting. We have we have perks for just those patron members, and that's a way that they can get access to Paul, who is an expert builder, and we're experts at project management and experts at all of that kind of stuff, and you can get access to us for a fraction of what it would cost you to hire a general contractor. And it's still somewhat difficult to find a general contractor who really understands doing a full like steel frame barndominium build or a full post frame barndominium build. They aren't a ton of them. So we just are providing that access for people that they can have somebody that they can trust and say, hey, this is my scenario. What would you do in it? And we can guide them.
Perfect. Yeah. And that's nationwide too, correct?
Oh, yes. So we work with people all over the country. We're working with people like, right now we've got clients in Washington. We have clients in Indiana. We have them in, just all over the country. We're working with them. And we're also keeping our education up really high on knowing what changes depending on where you're building, because that's a big, you'll get a lot of opinions in the barndominium community of it can only be done this way, but they're telling you that because of one specific location, not because of considering like where you're supposed to be, where you're building it. And so we're saying, hey, this is not suitable if you live in X part of the country, or this is suitable, and different things like that. So we're just trying to like help people sift through the noise, because there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions out there. And so we don't typically tell you exactly what to do. We just tell you this is what we do and this is why we do it, so that you can make an informed choice.
No, I really love that, because when we started, really delving in to kind of building our own community in the barndominium space, we started to compile a builder list. And so this is in the state of Michigan of, everybody that we would run across that has some experience with building barndominiums. But the challenge, of course, as bankers is, we don't get into a vetting process, nor are we qualified to. And so all of a sudden now we've got a list of people, but what's really their qualifications? We know some people on there are truly qualified because we've worked with them, but that's a small minority of the group. And what you would do is, being out of state, even if someone wanted to build with a local builder, you could give almost like a consulting, like, hey, these are the things you're asked. This is the, these are your interview questions when you go to meet your builder. So I just love the whole concept. I think it's fantastic. So.
Thank you. So we do a lot of vetting for people. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
But I tell clients all the time, I'm like, give me the name of your, we make you write down who's your county contact, and then also like who are the builders you run into, and then if you don't have one, I'm talking to one, because we know what questions to ask.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
We know what's essential to the process.
So kind of leading off of that, because, that would be a great resource for a lot of people, because one thing that, because I'm not going to build a barndominium anytime soon. My brother, he's building one here. He's breaking ground soon. But I'm hoping down the line that I can get back out into the country and build up my own barndominium, have a farm set up. What would you guys say was the most stressful part of the process of building a barndominium? Anytime building a house is stressful. Was there anything that really stood out?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I lived in my garage for a year, so that was pretty stressful. Barndominiums are wonderful because the way if you construct, because you guys know there's three types of homes somebody might be talking about when they say the word barndominium. One is a steel frame, which is the type that Megan lives in. Post frame, which is the type that I live in and I build, and then the third is the stick frame conventional build with the metal cladding. So people are will refer to that as a barndominium. So but post frame and steel frame lend themselves really well to, you get that exterior structure up, and you can get yourself to where there's at least dried in area that you're out of the elements pretty quickly. And so that's what happened with us, is that we ended up moving into our garage. And because we put a processing kitchen in the garage, so that we had a kitchen, we put a washer dryer hook up in it, where my vehicle parks in our garage now is where our dining room table sat. Just like we lived in there. Our TV was set up, everything, and that was really really stress. It was like good and bad all at the same time. It was really stressful because we didn't put a bathroom in the design because we weren't originally intending on living in the garage. So that got stressful when you'd have to pull the toilet in the house out because the drywallers were coming, or different things like that. So yeah, we have a podcast episode that I can talk way too long about. But yeah, it's all that. Yeah, that got pretty stressful because our kid, we have 3 kids and we were all living in the garage and trying to make it work.
Wow.
Well, you did. You made it work. Y'all survived. You live in the house now. You did it. So
we did. And we actually do consult people on how do you make that happen for yourself. Like if this is the direction you want to go, can you live in your garage while you finish your house? So it's like we've kind of lived through it, and so now we know all the tips and tricks and things that we would do differently. And you never know, you might see us doing it again.
How about you, Megan? Did you get any stress moments?
Yeah, so we actually started building in the middle of COVID, which was the worst for us. I think for us, we cash flowed our build. We didn't get a loan, and we poured everything we had into it. And we'd never owned a home before. So for us, when we were cutting checks every month for a year and a half, 2 years for $20,000 or $40,000, that was terrifying for me because I didn't grow up with anything. So we get to the point where we're ready and we have worked hard and made sacrifices. And we were living in an unfinished 20-year-old. We bought it and had to remodel it double wide down the street. My husband deployed for 6 months right at the beginning of our build. I had a baby the day our building was delivered. Like we went through it for the 2 years of our build. It just, all of it was really hard. Sorry, I'm like getting choked up thinking about all of this again because it's a lot. But for us, the hardest part of the process was just that life didn't stop when we started building and everything kept coming. Like I said, I had a baby the day the building was delivered and construction actually started. Right after my baby was born, he was like 2 weeks old. We went home because my grandmother was dying. So we flew back to Texas on my husband's leave right before deployment. Said goodbye to my grandmother, came home, Woody deployed. And of course, when someone deploys, the washer breaks, the water line, busts, the car stops running. All of that kind of stuff started happening here. And we're in North Carolina, families in Texas. And then with COVID and building during COVID, it was like nothing that we had picked 6 months before and put into our fancy spreadsheets for the whole house was with, hyperlinks and everything. We knew what we wanted everywhere. And then all of a sudden, nothing was available. And it went from you can order flooring today and get it in 2 weeks to you can order flooring today and the factory will say it's going to be delivered in 2.5 months. And then when it comes time, it's going to be machined incorrectly and it's going to end up taking you 4 months to get it installed. So those things were really hard for us. And we were just in such a transitional period in life where we became parents after infertility. We, went through my husband, for the last year of our build, every Monday, my husband was told, basically, you're probably going to get kicked out of the Navy. So in as little as 10 days, you could be without a job, insurance, all that stuff. So it was just like, for us, that was the hardest part. But we were in like an exceptional situation where it's like life kind of piled on. But I think that's the hardest part for most people is life doesn't stop. So all of the things that you go through get amplified.
I think that's a great, for both of you, that is actually a great lesson for our listeners because, and maybe that's not the right word to say lesson, but it's a sharing that you guys are being very sincere and raw with us and showing that, hey, things happen to all of us. We are all going through things. It happens, and just be resilient. And I think that's part of what I really like about the Barndominium community is that in just, I don't know, let's say the yearish or so that we've really delved into this is that the people inside of this, that's the way it feels, like the old homesteads, right? Like we're supporting each other virtually. We're not doing the picnics out in the front yard like, maybe the old days, but that everyone gives support virtually to one another because life does happen. So I appreciate both of you guys sharing very from the heart, like of what you've gone through.
Yeah, well, and that's where a lot of the tour came from. At the height of the tour, when we had the most people building, the most people sharing, and like really being involved in it, was towards the end of COVID, because it started January of 2021. And from there, it kind of exploded, and lots of now big Barndominium accounts have participated here and there and started small in the tour and then grew out to do whatever it is that they're doing while they did their builds. But it was based on all of us supporting each other, lending support, because Facebook groups are great, but they're just people behind a screen. Right. With the Barndominium tour, we were able to connect people who were actively building with people who had built, with contractors like Paul and Emily, the guys from Lance Buildings. Like, we have lots of folks who have jumped in and lent support, and then just been there to listen. We took a trip for a month this summer, spent a week with Paul and Emily. Woody got to go work on a job with Paul, which was really fun. They do a thing called Barndo Rescue, where they can actually go out and help people with their Barndominium builds. And we stopped at a bunch of other builds that we've been talking to from the beginning of their build all the way to moving in, and stayed the night in a couple of people's houses. We camped with someone in their trailer that they're living in, like their RV. While they're building. Like, we got to do those things and meet people who are going through the thing and understand, what we went through. And we understand what they went through. And I think that's the number one thing people were telling us is like, our friends and family love us, but they're not going to come camp in our trailer with us and help hang drywall. Like, they're not going to do that, but I have strangers on the internet that are checking in with me constantly about, how is this going? Did you get this fixed? Did this come in? And it's a community. There's not a lot of adventure left in the world. So I happen to think people who are building their own homes, whether they're Barndominiums or not, are pioneers in one of the last, wild things that a family or an individual can do in this day and age.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's probably a good way to wrap things up. Jonathan, do you have anything to add as we kind of close this session out? And
I guess we can I know we've kind of like shared some personal things and, greatly appreciate it. And we went deep, but like, I guess we'll kind of keep on that topic a little bit. Like, you're talking about the community, and like, I always see like Barndominium lifestyle. And to me, like, my end goal is to build, a Barndominium at some point on 100 plus acres, be self-sustainable, like not have to go to the grocery store, do any of that stuff. I'm kind of like a modern day hippie right now, because like, I don't go to the doctors. I don't do any of that stuff. I want to just eat, grow my own food, all that stuff. Like, what would you guys define your, like, the Barndominium lifestyle? Like, what does it mean to you? Like, if there is a meaning, or like, if you have to like sum it up in a way.
I think everyone's is different. I just think you're free. You're free, and you're on your own. And that's what most people want. They want to do what they want to do. And that's why they're building this unique, weird, super functional house, because they have things to do. And the house is going to facilitate that.
Yes, it definitely, people use the word Barndominium to express their like goals and how they want to raise their children and how they want to raise their food, and where they see themselves in the future. And people often refer to their Barndominium as their forever home. So they're planning on living out their days there and stuff. So it's much more than a house for people. It's a whole experience for their family, and there's a lot of emotion that goes into it. There's a lot of but like Megan said, it boils down to they want to be free to make the choices that they want to make.
I love it. Yep. What a great way to end. The only bad part about ending is like, I want to spend like the next 4 hours with you guys. It's just, you're so wonderful. You got so much good information. And the other part is you both of you come at, I could tell the minute I connected with Megan, like you come at it with a servant's heart. You like totally, giving and, unselfish, and just that, and that's, you're our peeps. So we love it, and we appreciate you being here with us. So for our listeners, and Jonathan always makes sure he gets this inside because this goes live on video for our YouTube channels as well. But as far as contact information, what is the best way to, connect? And of course, listeners, be respectful of time. We've got 2 celebrities with us. So and do at some point, there's everybody's got to earn a living as well. So I suspect, you got to expect some payment inside of there at some point for a certain amount of services. But if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where do they find you, or where can they follow?
Well, you can find either my husband or I. We go by Mr. Postframe and Mrs. Postframe all over the internet. So we each have websites. We have YouTube, we have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have Facebook. I think, it's not hard to track us down.
If you Google her, she will show up.
Perfect. We love it. That's awesome. And Emily, you've got a podcast as well, correct?
Yes. So Megan and I have the Build Life podcast, which we interview other people that are building or have built, and we talk about more in depth about like what were the things that you went through. Like I said, I have a whole episode of talking about how often I was without a toilet in my garage living.
Yeah. Nice.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, we tend to get more into the life side of things than the construction side of things. We talk logistics, but we talk about the life side. But anyway, I'm Woody's Barndominium Build on Instagram. That's probably where we're most prolific. We're also barndominiumtour.com. That's where we post all of our barndos for sale, articles about things to do and not to do. For example, I think one of the most popular ones we have is like sealing concrete floors, what not to do from my experience and really screwing that up. We also have a Barndominium lenders list on there, lots of good information. We talk a lot on the blog about Barndominium homes themselves, individual homes, deep dives into the process that one family or another went into to build it. You can always email me, megan@barndominiumtour.com. But definitely check out the website. We're trying to move that way, and soon we'll be on YouTube too. So we're working on it. We're getting
awesome. There. Well, thank both of you very much for being with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. It was great.
All right. Take care. Until everybody, guys, hey, make sure you subscribe to the Barndominium Podcast and the Michael Mortgage Barndominium playlist on the YouTube channel. We'll look forward to the next episode with you. Take care.